الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us not to be isolated, but He created us in relationships, and sometimes it's very complex. And the ubudiyyah to Allah, to be, instead of ubudiyyah, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all what that word means, which is in every aspect in our life, has to be fulfilled when it comes to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rights of the human beings. And that's why, for example, people, they get together in the wajibat, in the obligatory acts, like in Salatul Jama'ah, in the Jum'ah, in the A'yad, the like of this. And also people get together to commit sins, wal'ayadhu billah, or to worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes they get together for permissible acts, but the permissible acts either will take them to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, or the opposite of that. So this can be one of the things that destroys the heart, or the opposite, purify the hearts. It's according to one's khulta, one's mixing with others. And this is something to be aware of. And as we know that there are many ayat of the Quran and hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talks about this, warning against the bad companionship. And as-sahib, sahib, he takes the person with him, the companion takes the person with him. Al-mar'u ala dini khalilih, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil. The person is according to his most intimate friend or his friends. So let each one of you look who is your friend. So this is ubudiyyah, this is a command of Allah. You can't just leave yourself to be acquainted with whoever comes along. No, you have to make a decision. Does that person valid for me to be as a friend to him? Does he someone that would increase my iman, or someone that would be the opposite? So this is a duty. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing. How are we dealing with one another, with people in our life? And when the ulama talked about, as far as the mufsidat, or the things that can corrupt the heart, one of which is this khulta. And sometimes in some situations where a person has to be kind of giving the time for himself only, and especially the coming days of Ramadan. It's meant for the person to be alone, to try his best to be on his own, except, of course, the salawat, the obligations, the things that he has to take care of, his family, the duties in one's life. Other than that, whatever time that a person can give to his own self, to be secluded, to be doing what? To be just sitting, doing nothing? No. To be in state of ibadah, to one's best ability. Reciting Quran, making dhikr, making dua. And this is what al-i'tikaf in Ramadan is all about. Al-i'tikaf is not about socializing, but it's the total opposite. It's about secluding oneself in the last 10 days of Ramadan, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do that, to be busy with the ibadah. Prophet ﷺ, as mentioned before, he would make the salah with the people. And then after that, يَدْخُلُ خِبَاءَهُ. He would enter the khiba', something that they would make to the Prophet ﷺ, like a tent type of a thing, that he would enter in it in the masjid, so that he does not leave the masjid, but he will be on his own, alayhi salatu wassalam. And that's why many of the ulama, the imma of this deen, they would leave, especially in these times, the ta'aleem and educating and things like this, because the special acts of ibadah, which is the Quran and the dhikr and the dua with the obligations, this is what is most important. When you look also at the effect of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in many verses, but one of which you look first at the relationships between people, human beings, towards one another. Whatever you are with someone, or there is a relationship, whether it's a friend or a neighbor, whatever there is, any relationship, or any time people get with one another, whatever they are upon together, it's going to continue as long as that thing that they are together will continue. Meaning, if the reason why they get together because of something worldly fun that they do together, they play soccer together. Like, this is what the time of enjoyment, and this is where they're companions in this. It's going to end once they don't do this anymore. Right? If it's because they like certain things in one another, they laugh when they're together. Once it's gone, the relationship is gone. And that's why anything that is based on the dunya matters will end by the end of this dunya. It doesn't stay forever. Except the one that was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is continuous forever. And that's the subject of al-ukhuwa fillah, the brotherhood for the sake of Allah. People are together for the sake of Allah. And there's nothing wrong with having some also materialistic happiness and things like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about the disbelievers when Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said to his people, وقال إنما اتخذتم من دون الله أوثانا مودة بينكم في الحياة الدنيا ثم يوم القيامة يكفر بعضكم ببعض ويلعن بعضكم بعضا ومأواكم النار وما لكم من ناصرين. Which means that you took قال إنما اتخذتم من دون الله, you took besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أوثانا, idols. He was talking to his people, مودة بينكم, مودة بينكم, that you love each other for it. This is what they like each other for, because they all worship the same idol. So this is one of the meanings of it. And the other meaning is that this is what you used to enjoy when you're together. So you loved one another for the sake of the idol that you worship, because you can share the same thing. And this is a normal thing for human beings. Human beings, they like those who have something that they share with one another. Or whenever you would get together, this is the moments of joy that you would get when you would worship the idols and do all these types of shirk matters. مودة بينكم في الحياة الدنيا, in this worldly life. ثم يوم القيامة, but then what's going to happen in the day of Al-Qiyamah? يكفر بعضكم ببعض ويلعن بعضكم بعضا. You will disbelieve in one another, you will curse one another. So you see how human beings can go from having the mawadda. Al-mawadda, as it's mentioned in the verse, is not just a love in the heart. It's a love in the heart that has its effect physically, that a person would show that love, would show that care towards one another, which is in principle, it's a good thing. But when it was for the sake of other than Allah, they enjoyed it in this life. But in the hereafter, that becomes the total opposite. They would curse one another. And the same thing, al-akhillau ba'duhum yawma'idhin li ba'din adu illa al-muttaqin. The al-akhilla, the most closest of friends, they are enemies to one another, except in the day of Al-Qiyamah, except al-muttaqin, except the people of taqwa. Then they won't be enemies to each other in the day of judgment. So it shows that this is a serious matter, and for all of our actions, even relationships, it has to be forever. If you want to have a relationship, you think of how this relationship is going to be forever, not just terminated with this life. And then when it comes to whatever in this life, a person to protect himself from the haram, to protect himself, of course, there's da'wah, there is dealing with people, co-workers, people in the streets, neighbors, and so on. It's all for the sake of Allah, and to do goodness and justice to them, and to be kind to them. A person is doing that for the sake of Allah, seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter, and not only limited to this life of this world. And as a result of that, again, what's something more, the time after Asr till Maghrib, in Jumu'ah, Salaf al-Salih, some of them would not speak to one another. They're busy reciting Quran, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the morning and in the evening. When it's time of the Salah, of course, the Prophet ﷺ would be in his home doing what anyone would do. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, but once the adhan comes, as if we do not know him and he doesn't know us. He's completely in a different state. Why? Because now this is the time for the Salah. So, and with this is how can we detach ourselves? We're living at times where it's very difficult for a person to detach himself from all of these distractions that we have in our hands and our phones and our people that we meet. We don't meet virtually. It becomes so much. So that's why the last 10 days of Ramadan, it's an opportunity to have that detachment. If it's time for the Salah, we have to detach ourselves. When it's time of a person sitting, reading Quran, making dhikr, making dua, not to allow ourselves to be always attached to these gadgets and all of these types of things. And this is a test from Allah. And yes, more fitan, but more rewards. More rewards if a person exert himself so that he would have this time for his own self. So this is another level of staying away from the necessary mixing with people in these coming days till the end of the month of Ramadan. But it's to be done with ilm, to be done with knowledge, so that a person does not undermine certain rights in his life, for example, but to give whatever time that a person have for the sake of Allah to establish these acts of worship. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy, inshallah, for each and every one of us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم.